What is up, everybody? Sven Diesel here, and we're going to be tying up a balanced leech. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here and get this a little bit more in center, adjust the camera so that you can see what we're doing. This is pretty much what we're going to be tying up here. We're using some zero gravity dubbing. This is for tying a indicator style balanced leech for fishing still water. So we're using an Arex FW550. I've got some Semperfli nano silk, this is their classic wax thread in a 6/0, and I'm going to go ahead and lay down a little bit of a thread base here on the shank of the hook, working my way back almost to the bend. I think using a heavier denier thread is very critical for this because we're going to be making a dubbing loop later in the process. And for this, what we're going to do is this is an embroidery pin here, and then I think it's a number 17 and an 1.25 inches. You can also, there's a few other ways you can do it, whether you get nails or whatever, but this is a 3/32 tungsten bead, and what we're going to do is with the 3/32 for this size of a hook, I know that I need to be about 2 bead spacings to get this to balance in the water when fishing. Usually, if it's for me personally, I go a little bit heavier and I space the bead almost under the hook eye. But for this, we're going to be doing that, and so I measure it, and then I just take a pair of wire snips here. I'll go ahead and trim that out so that we don't have a long pointy thing sticking off the back. And then I will put it in position, and then I'll do about 3-4 wraps. Make sure that it's where I want it, and I've done enough of these. If you're questioning if it will balance, you can tie one and then go test it in the sink or something like that, a bowl of water, to see how it works, and then adjust your bead accordingly. Now, I like to make these really durable. Someone once complained that the tungsten beads seem to have shifted on them, that it bent up on a rock, and I don't have that issue, and I think it's because I lay down some super glue on each side, and then I do another thread wrap. Whether you do touching wraps is irrelevant, and if it's the bead gets in your way, if it's annoying, you can always take your thread wraps all the way up to the bead, but I want to minimize the bulk on there. Now, I'm using some of this Fish Hunter marabou by Nature Spirits, the distributor. It's really premium feathers, in my opinion, and almost perfect for this size leech. Sometimes you need to use 2 feathers. With this, I only need 1. You can just look at the flow on that. Really nice. What I do here is I'm just going to take and trim out the tip. It helps with making a better taper on the fly when wet, and then I'll stroke the fibers back. We're not going to be using anything over here. I'm primarily looking for this. You can see we have some really long flowy fiber tips. I'm not going to trim those out, but what I'm looking for is where the bulk ends, which is about right here. And so I'm going to measure that, and I want that to roughly be one length of the overall fly. And so I know it's about right there, so I'll transition hands. I'll go ahead and tie that in with 3 or 4 loose wraps, and then I'll check the length. And you can see the bulk ends about here, but then I got some of these wispy fibers that are going to really add to the taper of that, and that's pretty much a perfect tie-in. And then I'll take the marabou all the way up about a wrap or 2 behind the tungsten. I'll go ahead and trim that out. Now, that's the secondary reason why I think that these are a little bit more durable than most, and that's because I ran the marabou all the way up the shank, because we're going to super glue it one more time, and by doing that, I think that it kind of creates a super glue cone around the hook shank and the embroidery needle. But we're not going to do that yet. We're going to tie in a little bit of this gold crystal flash. I'm just going to take a strand out. Go ahead and just fold it in half, and then I will tie it in on. We got to make sure we get this in half, because these are actually the exact length I need. I've been tying a few of these tonight, and so we're going to take that and hold it on my side. I'm going to do 2 or 3 securing wraps. I'll bring this up, and as I do, I'll do a wrap over, and then I'll pinch it so that these crystal flash are almost like going right down each side. And look at that, they're just perfect. So the next step is I'm going to make a dubbing loop. Now I'm sure if you don't know how to do that, there's a lot of videos, but I'm just going to basically stick my finger in here, make about a 5-6 inch loop, and then I'll wrap back over the shank, keeping that loop on my finger, and then I'll twist it so that we have a point. You can see how it makes a little X right there. And I want that X to be right here at the back of the fly. That way we don't have a gap. It makes it a little bit easier for doing a dubbing loop, in my opinion. And I'm using the Stonfo Rotozip tool. I'm just going to go ahead and insert that into my dubbing loop. And I like to have a little bit of an orange thread underbody. So instead of swapping out my thread at this point, I just color it with a Sharpie. And I bet you can't see that, but it's colored orange. And for the body on this, we're using some Snake River Fly. This is their zero gravity dubbing. Really primo stuff. You could make your own, but then you got to deal with making your own, and I'd rather tie more flies and fish them than spend the time making this blend, because I don't know why, they got really good colors. And what I do is I pull out a pinch, and it's roughly half the width of a pencil. I stack the fibers, and then I place it into the dubbing loop like so, and then I hold tension with the palm of my hand on my tool. And this is going to be difficult to see, but I'm going to spread these fibers out so they're not in clumps. It's going to be impossible to not get some clumps, but if you can see how sparse that is, that's about as good as I get it. And then all I do is give it an old twisty twist, making sure not to pull too tight. You don't want to snap it off. But you can see we've got a really good dubbing little loop there. And here's the second key to make this durable. We super glue again. And I like doing it right before I spin this dubbing loop up the hook shank, because I think that it makes it a lot more durable by having this go into that super glue that we just did. And we got to stroke these fibers because I don't want to trap too many of them to that super glue. Remember, this is wet, but we're not doing touching wraps. I'm almost doing equal wraps like you're doing a ribbing, just because I don't like these to be ultra bulky, but it really depends on how your dubbing loop turned out. I mean, it's one of those things you got to kind of do it, fish it, do it, water test it, do it, and then you'll kind of get a sense of where you want it and what the fish really like. And for me personally, a little bit sparser is a little bit better. So we'll go ahead and secure that, tie it off, and then I'll do a few wraps. I'll pinch the material back, and I'll create about a bead's length right there, and one that ties off the dubbing loop really well. But it also, we're going to put a little ice dub collar on this, which I think makes this fly. I don't know if it's the material here, the tail, the crystal flash. There's so many variables that could make this fly good, but you can see right there how that's going to taper really nicely, really leech-esque. And for some reason, this muted orange bead with what we're going to do next, I don't know, I think it just creates a really good combo. So I'll super glue the thread wraps, so this fly is going to be durable. I'm taking some of this orange, it's a shrimpish color ice dub, just in a minimal amount. I'm going to create a longer noodle. You could go, clump it all up together. I prefer to do a little bit sparser so that I can wrap over my wraps. And so I'll start there behind the tungsten bead, I'll jump back, and then I'll try to create a really nice little collar right there, and then end with my thread in front of it. Be careful, the super glue is wet, but do one full wrap, getting that ice dub collar placed backwards, and then of course we'll color our thread red. And the orange bead with the shrimp color and this red, I just think is a killer combo, and that might be why it's so effective. I don't know. But we've caught a lot of trout, bass this spring and summer, and it has been just killer in this particular color combo. And so I don't tweak it very much beyond this in the olives. I do have one secret, but that's not for sharing on the socials just yet. Now that is the finished fly right there. We're going to fish it. It's going to ride hook point up. We'll run our tippet down to this, and the depth of how much tippet or leader we're going to use depends on how deep the water is, of course. Sometimes it's 3 feet, sometimes I'm 9 to 15 feet, and depending on how deep you are also depends on what type of indicator you're using. For most of the time when I fish these, I'm using one of those twist locks, so I can adjust it. If you're going over about 9 to 10 feet, depending on how big your rod is, you're going to want to use the I don't know what they're called, but they're the foam indicators. You push it in. That way you can do a longer leader and get down to the 15-20 feet range. But that is the zero gravity dubbing balanced leech. I'll go ahead and save this. So thanks for tuning in. Comment if you have any questions. So thank you.